Welcome back to Alert View, where we try to make the dizzying world of macroeconomics slightly more digestible and a touch more entertaining than having your teeth drilled without anesthetic. Let's talk about something that, on the surface, might seem soporific enough to induce a nap, but in reality, has the potential to wreck household finances, drive up mortgage repayments, and rattle the very foundations of government credibility, the bond markets. More specifically, the increasingly tense standoff between bond investors and Chancellor Rachel Reeves' much-vaunted fiscal rules. Yes, we know, fiscal rules don't exactly scream excitement. But when the people who lend the government money start panicking, it's not just city traders who feel the burn. Interest rates shift, borrowing becomes costlier, and before long, that promise of economic stability starts to look more like a punchline. So, let's imagine you're Rachel Reeves. You've just stepped into number 11, having spent the last year or more assuring the British public, and, just as importantly, the financial markets, that you are the very embodiment of fiscal responsibility. You've laid out strict rules: borrowing must be sustainable, debt must fall as a share of GDP over time, and any deviation from these principles would be, in your own words, non-negotiable. Ironclad. Unshakable. Gospel. But now, the bond markets, those ever-skeptical, razor-sharp guardians of financial orthodoxy, responding with something approaching open mockery. Yields are rising. Gilt prices are falling. Investors are demanding a higher return for lending money to the government, a clear vote of no confidence. It's as if Reeves promised to be home by midnight, but the clock's striking 12 and she's still at the bar 3 drinks deep, frantically checking the time. And here's where things get genuinely absurd. It was less than a year ago, less than a year, that Reeves stood up before the cameras and made her fiscal rules the cornerstone of Labour's economic pitch. These weren't guidelines or aspirations, they were declarations. Immutable. More sacred than a Sunday roast. But now, just months later, major bond fund managers are essentially placing bets on whether she'll break them, as if she's a contestant on Love Island swearing blind she'll stay loyal. One such manager is Neil Mehta of RBC Blue Bay Asset Management, and yes, that's a real financial institution, not a boutique resort in the Caribbean. He didn't mince words. According to Mehta, it's very unlikely the Chancellor will be able to stick to her rules. That's asset manager code for, she's in serious trouble, mate. And he's got a point, the numbers are ugly. Since the election, government borrowing has exceeded forecasts by an eye-watering £50 billion. That's not a rounding error. That's the economic equivalent of discovering someone's stolen the GDP of Luxembourg and dumped it onto Britain's balance sheet. To put it another way, £50 billion could buy you approximately 25 million pints of beer, fund the NHS for a solid couple of months, or serve as the sort of overspend that has bond traders waking up in cold sweats. Mehta went further, accusing the government of abandoning even the pretense of fiscal credibility. That's akin to your mortgage broker saying, buying a Bugatti on your credit card while between jobs. Bold move. Technically accurate. Emotionally devastating. But the fiscal wreckage doesn't end there. Let's talk about gilt yields, Britain's version of government bonds, which are currently behaving like a teenager with a caffeine addiction and no curfew. The 10-year gilt yield now stands at 4.71%, up 43 basis points from this time last year. In layman's terms, the financial markets are not entirely convinced Rachel Reeves has a handle on the situation. More concerning still are the 30-year bonds, which have seen their yields spike by a massive 72 basis points since 2024. That's not a gentle warning. That's a blaring siren. It suggests investors aren't just nervous, they're actively fleeing, setting fire to the tent on their way out. This isn't just a recent flare-up either. The seeds of this crisis were sown months ago. As early as January 2025, bond yields began to climb in anticipation of Reeves' first spring statement. Investors were already skittish, questioning how Labour's ambitious spending pledges would square with Reeves' hardline fiscal stance. That spring statement managed to calm nerves, briefly. But it was a bandage on a bullet wound. Now, as we head towards the autumn, 30-year yields are not only rising again, they've surged past levels not seen since the late 1990s. Think about that. The last time yields were this high, Oasis were topping the charts, Titanic was breaking box office records, and Tony Blair was still being hailed as the savior of British politics. Different era, same problem, governments making grand economic promises while markets prepare to call their bluff. And just when you thought it couldn't get more complicated, in steps the International Monetary Fund. The IMF has suggested a rather curious proposal: reduce the number of independent assessments from the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, from 2 per year to just 1. Sounds innocuous. But it's not. Here's the translation: fewer opportunities for respected experts to publicly say, actually, Chancellor, your sums don't quite add up. It's the fiscal equivalent of weighing yourself less often while insisting you're sticking to your diet. On paper, it gives the government more flexibility. In practice, it looks suspiciously like ducking accountability. Some analysts interpret this as creating space for Reeves to quietly tweak, bend, or even outright abandon the rules she previously described as non-negotiable. It's a subtle but powerful shift, one that gives her more room to maneuver politically, but at the potential cost of market trust. Now, before anyone dashes off to stockpile canned goods, it's worth remembering this is part of a broader, global trend. The UK is not alone in feeling the squeeze. Across the developed world, from the United States to Japan to Germany, long-term bond yields have been climbing steeply. This isn't just a British drama, it's a global financial Jenga tower, and no one knows which block will bring the whole thing crashing down. Still, the stakes for the UK are particularly high. With October's autumn budget rapidly approaching, Reeves now finds herself in a game of fiscal chicken with the world's most unforgiving lenders. She must either stay the course, and face the political blowback of cuts or tax rises, or backtrack on her promises and risk a credibility crisis that could haunt Labour's economic legacy for years. So, there you have it, the high-stakes sequel nobody asked for, Government versus Bond Markets, The Reckoning. Rachel Reeves made bold promises. The numbers are misbehaving. The markets are nervous. And the question now is brutally simple: will she stick to her own rules, or buckle under the pressure? One thing's for certain, this October's autumn budget won't just be a routine fiscal update, it may prove more dramatic than your favorite Netflix thriller. If you want to stay ahead of the economic drama, political reversals, and every fiscal faceplant in between, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Reeves will stick to her fiscal rules? Or is the next market meltdown already brewing? At Alert View, we track every twist, turn, and U-turn, so you don't have to. Stay tuned, assuming the economy's still in one piece by the time we meet again.